Today, Tuesday, November the 3rd, we celebrate the patron saint of race relations and social justice, Martin de Porres, who appropriately in these days likewise is the patron of public health workers, of those who care for those suffering from the likes of COVID-19. In 1579, Martin was born in Lima, Peru, out of wedlock. His father was a Spanish nobleman, and his mother, Ana, was a free black slave from Panama. Martin inherited his mother's features and complexion, and his father refused to acknowledge his mulatto child until many years later. Martin was apprenticed to a barber, a profession which at the time combined hair cutting with surgical and medical skills. He quickly mastered the trade. Already very prayerful and deeply attached to the Blessed Sacrament, at the age of 15, he applied for admission to a Dominican monastery in Lima. He wanted to join the friars. Under Peruvian law, descendants of Africans and Native Americans were prohibited from becoming full members of religious orders. The only route open was to ask to be admitted as a volunteer donado. He asked for the lowliest position as a lay helper, responsible for tasks like sweeping the floors. He is often thus pictured with a broom. He was allowed to take vows as a member of the Third Order of St. Dominic, and then in 1603, he was allowed to profess religious vows as a Dominican lay brother. He devoted himself to the sick and the poor, regardless of race, and to menial tasks within his monastery. Through his ingenious knowledge of herbal remedies and homemade medicines, he won a reputation for the power of healing. Despite his extreme humility, Martin could not disguise his talents and abilities, especially his medical skills. At age 34, he was put in charge of the monastery infirmary and continued in that ministry until his death. Martin's reputation further grew, the result of his efforts reputedly supplemented by miraculous healing powers. Many stories were told of his mysterious diagnostic abilities and his power to heal by his mere touch or presence. He did not confine his healing ministry to the monastery, but cared for the sick and injured wherever he found them, especially the wretched poor. He might bring them back to his own cell bed. When his superior ordered him to desist, he meekly answered, quote, "Forgive my mistake, and please be kind enough to instruct me. I did not know that the precept of obedience took precedence over that of charity." Henceforth, he was given liberty to act as he felt right. His Dominican confreres called him Father of Charity, but Martin referred to himself as Mulatto Dog. Dominicans at times refer to themselves as dogs because of the Latin loose translation of the term Dominican. Again, once, when the monastery was in debt, he offered himself to be sold as a slave. The deeply moved prior told Martin, "Go back to the monastery, you are not for sale." His charity was poured out on all those who were counted as nothing: Indians, the poor, the sick. He had a special ministry to African slaves, to whom he would deliver gifts of food and drink, healing their sick, consoling them in their miserable bondage. Even animals were the objects of his loving service. Martin had a remarkable rapport with such creatures. When the monastery was once infested with mice, Martin caught one and exhorted it respectfully to lead its fellows out of the monastery and into the garden, where he would personally provide for their needs. Within minutes, a horde of mice abandoned the monastery just as he had requested. And ever after, Martin kept his side of the bargain, bringing food and leaving it for them. Prevailed upon to become a full lay brother because his desire to become a foreign missionary and suffer martyrdom was thwarted, he committed himself instead to a life of prayer, vigorous penances, and extreme asceticism. He subsisted almost entirely on bread and water. When questioned about such practices, he mumbled something about the immensity of sins to be atoned for, such as slavery, the scorn heaped on the poor and the Indians, the existence of so much injustice in an ostentatiously Catholic society. He did not place himself apart from the sins of his age, and he punished himself accordingly. Ellsberg notes that, like St. Francis, Martin was a living parable of the reign of God. His life reflected his great love for God and all of God's gifts. During his lifetime, he befriended St. Rose of Lima. His humility and charity were the subject of numerous stories. Witnesses later testified to his supernatural gifts. These included the power of levitation during prayer, the gifts of healing, of miraculous learning, of clairvoyance, of the power to pass through locked doors and to become invisible at will. As if these abilities were not sufficient, it was also claimed that Martin had the gift of bilocation, the ability to be in more than one place at the same time. Witnesses claimed to have met him in distant corners of the globe, when all the time he had never left Lima. Martin's cult sprang up immediately after his death. He suffered from a violent fever, and he died on this date, November the 3rd, in 1639, at the age of 60. All Lima mourned his passing. 25 years after his death, his body was exhumed and found to be still intact. Formal canonization, however, was slow in coming. Finally, Martin was beatified in 1837. Martin's sometimes defiant attachment to the ideal of social justice gradually, over the decades, achieved deep residence in a church seeking to carry forth that ideal in a modern world. In declaring him a saint in 1962, Pope John XXIII named him the patron of all who work for social justice and declared, quote, "It is remarkable how even today his influence can still move us toward the things of heaven." This beloved and very popular saint, amongst others, is patron of Peru, Vietnam, Mexico, race relations, blacks, mixed-race people, and Peruvian naval aviators. On this challenging election day today, it certainly seems right to request that St. Martin de Porres intercede to his and to our loving God for the United States,